Hello, I'm Mr. Burris, and I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about the Excel project that is coming up in the next few days, and hopefully show you how to do some things so that you can successfully complete your Excel project. In order to find the project description, you can go to the Content tab once logged into the course, and on the left side of the screen you'll see Project Information. A description of the Excel project then appears, as well as some other files. The Excel project is actually a project made up of 10 different mini projects, and you'll submit all 10 of these mini projects at one time. You can use the hard copy of the textbook to assist you, or the electronic version, and these are the 10 parts of the Excel project. Construct a categorical frequency table, a group frequency table for data set 3 on page 806, a histogram, an ogive, and a frequency polygon based on your group frequency table, a pie chart for problem number 28 on page 93, a Pareto chart, a time series graph, and calculate the measures of central tendency and the measures of variation. Now, parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 all use data set number 3 from page 806 in the hard copy of the book. If you're using the electronic version at Connect Math, there is no page 806. Finding that, you'll need to go into the end matter. That can be a little bit difficult. So we have gone ahead and, under the Project Information tab in Excel, copied data set 3 for you. It has 108 data values. You probably don't want to input all of those by hand. So just open up data set number 3 in Excel and copy and paste it into the version of Excel that you are using. Data set 12, which is right below it here in D2L, is used for problems parts 9 and 10 of the Excel project. And again, those data files, that one contains a lot of data values. Just copy and paste it into your version. You probably don't want to spend time entering those two data sets by hand. So the very first part of the Excel project is to construct a categorical frequency table. So you'll need to open up Excel. Now when you open up Excel, this is what it looks like. This is an older version. I'm using the 2013 version of Excel. If you're using the 2016 version, then only one sheet opens. If you're using an older version, it defaults to opening with 3 different tabs. All 10 parts of the Excel project are to be input on separate tabs within Excel. To add sheets, just click the plus button, or if you're using an older version, the Add Sheet button, and additional tabs will open. So I'm going to get out of that for now and open this Excel project. I've got a sample Excel project listed here. These are not the ones that you're going to be dealing with, but the processes are going to be exactly the same. The very first part of the Excel project is to construct a categorical frequency distribution for a data set, and I have got a data set listed here full of A's, B's, C's, and D's, and I want to show you how to get Excel to count this for you. You want to minimize the amount of manual inputting that you are going to be using in Excel. We would like you to use as many Excel functions as possible. So the first thing that I need to do is to list the categories. So I'm going to put in column B, I'm going to put just a label called category. And in the next column, I'm going to put a count. And then under category, you'll notice that my data set is comprised of A's, B's, C's, and D's. So I'm going to put A, B, C, I don't want category, I just want C, and D. And now in the count column, I'm going to input a function and let Excel do the counting for me. So go to the Formulas tab, and then over to More Functions, and I want the statistical functions, and scroll down until you see the Count If option. And then in the little box pops up, the range, that's where your data is located. So highlight all of your data values. And the criteria, I want it to count the number of A's that are in this data set. So for the criteria, I'm just going to enter A and click OK. And it's counted that I've got 5 A's in this data set. So I'm going to do the same thing now for B, C, and D. More functions, statistical, count if, highlight the data, tell it that I want it to count the B's, and then do the same thing for the C's. And then finally for the D's, I'll do the same thing, more functions, statistical. I want the count if option, highlight the data. My criteria, I want it to count the D's, and there is my categorical frequency distribution. So that is done. I'm going to click the Sheet tab to change the title of this tab from Sheet number 1 to Categorical to describe what is being shown on that page. You can just leave it as Sheet number 1 if you want to. You don't have to change the tab title. And then, of course, the most important thing, I'm going to save it. So I want to save this project to my computer. So I'm going to save as, I'm going to call this Excel project. And I'm going to click yes that I want to overwrite the old version. And now, at least that is saved. So if there's a power outage or my computer crashes for some reason, at least I know that part of the Excel project is done. You'll want to make sure and get into the habit of saving every time you make any kind of little change, no matter how small it is, to your Excel project. Going back to the project description now, the second part of the Excel project is a group frequency table for data set 3 on page 806. For your Excel project, it deals with the lengths of North American rivers, and there are 108 data values. You probably don't want to enter those by hand, so copy the version of that data set we've got posted to D2L, copy and paste that into the version of Excel that you are using for your project. And I've got a smaller data set listed that I'm going to use for constructing my grouped frequency distribution. Here are my data values, and of course, if you remember from constructing group frequency distributions, we first need to find the range in the data, and then we divide that range by the number of classes that we are going to use. Well, to calculate the range, so I'm just going to type in the word range, and over here I'm going to input a formula and tell Excel to calculate my range for me. So I will go back to the Formulas tab, More Functions, Statistical, and down here is a maximum function. This will identify the largest data value that you have in your data set. So click the little button here next to number 1, and this is where you'll tell Excel to look for the data. So it's going to identify the maximum value for this data set, and click OK. And it says that the highest value is 3904. Well, the range is the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So I need to subtract out the minimum value. So I'm going to include another function. Statistical, minimum, highlight the data, click OK. And it says that there's a range in my data set of 3,846. Now that I have calculated the range, I need to determine how many classes do I want to use. If you have a small range, you can get by with a small number of classes, like 5 or 6. And for most of the data sets that we used in Chapter 2, when we covered distributions, we used a small number of classes. Well, now I've got a very large range, so using just 5 classes is going to be hiding a lot of detail. I'm going to want to use a minimum of 15. 20 would be better, but I'll get by with 15 here. So now that I've got my range and I know that I want to use 15 classes, I need to determine how large or how wide is each class going to be. So I need to calculate the class width. And the class width, of course, is the range divided by the number of classes. Well, my range is now located in field D1. So I want to tell Excel to divide the value in cell D number 1 where the range is located. So I'm going to hit equals. Anytime you do a calculation in Excel, you need to preface in the formula bar with an equal sign to tell Excel that it's going to be a calculation. If you don't include the equal sign, then when you reference a cell and do any kind of calculating, it's going to put whatever you type in into that Excel. But if I preface this with an equal sign, Excel knows that this is a calculation. So we're going to take the cell in D1 where I calculated my range, and I'm going to divide by 15, and that's going to give me my class width, which is 256.4. And we know from chapter 2 that we always round up to the next whole number. So in the field right next to it, I'm going to go over to field E3 and type in 257. And that is my class width. Each class that I use is going to be 15 units wide. Ordinarily, if we were constructing group frequency distribution by hand, we would construct a table with class limits and class boundaries, and then do a tally and convert the tally marks to frequencies, and then do a cumulative frequency column. It's somewhat different in Excel. And so now we're going to calculate, we just need the boundaries. That's what we need here for this group frequency distribution. So I need to calculate my boundaries. So I'm going to put boundaries here. And we know for the boundaries, once we find the limits, the lower class limit and upper class limit for each class, we take the smallest unit listed in the raw data, take half of that unit and subtract it from the lower class limit and add it to the upper class limit. Well, in this version, if my smallest data value is 58, and looking at the data, I've got all whole numbers here, so my smallest unit is 1 unit. I'm going to subtract 1/2 from 58, and that will give me 57.5, and I'll use that as my first lower class boundary. My first upper class boundary is going to be 57.5 plus 257. So I'm going to add 257 to the data value that I've got listed in field C6. So this is just doing some math. So I'm going to hit equals in the formula bar. I'm going to tell Excel that I want to take the data value in field C6 and add to it the data file, the data value listed in E3, which is where my class width is located. And so there is my first upper class boundary. And now I'm going to calculate my next upper class boundary by taking the field in C7 and adding the field in E3 to it. And then I go and I construct the next boundary. So that's going to be the field in C8 plus E3, and then C9 plus E3, and C10 plus E3, and C11 plus E3, and C12 plus E3, and C13 plus E3, and C14 plus E3. Let's see, I hit a wrong button. So C14 equals 3, that needs to be plus 3. And then C15 plus E3, and C16 plus E3, and C17 plus E3, and C18 plus E3, and C19 plus E3, and C20 plus E3. And there are all of my, those are my upper class, those are my boundaries. So I've calculated all my boundaries now. I'm going to go ahead and hit save because I don't want to go through that tedious calculation again. And now I'm ready to get Excel to construct my group frequency distribution. You can do it by hand. It takes a while. I would suggest letting Excel, we would like you to use the Excel functions. And Excel does have a nice data analysis tool pack that will create this distribution and the histogram at the same time. But there is a little bit of preliminary work that you need to do on your end in order to use it. You'll need to load the data analysis tool pack into your Excel version that you're using. To do that, click the File tab and scroll down to Options, and then a little box opens up. Down near the bottom of the options on the left side of the screen, you'll see Add-ins. So select Add-ins, and a box opens up with a whole bunch of stuff on it. Down below at the bottom it says Excel Add-ins, and there's a Go button right next to it. Click that, and you'll want to make sure the Analysis Tool Pack has a check mark next to it. If it doesn't, click that box to turn it off and to turn it back on. And if that Analysis Tool Pack has a check mark next to it, then you're good to go. Don't select any of the other options. Don't select Analysis Tool Pack VBA. Just Analysis Tool Pack. And then click OK. Now you're ready to let Excel construct your group frequency distribution and your histogram, and it'll do these things at the very same time. So select the Data tab, and over on the right side of the screen you'll see a Data Analysis option, so click that, and a box opens up with a whole bunch of stuff on it. We want the histogram. So highlight histogram, click OK, and a dialog box opens up. The input range, this is where your data is located, so you'll want to highlight all of the data that you're using. And once that's entered, click this box again. The bin range, those are your boundaries. So you'll need to tell Excel where the boundaries are, so highlight your boundaries. And you'll want to make sure that you click this Chart Output button. If the Chart Output button is not checked, then Excel will create the histogram, but you won't be able to see it. And there's no sense going through all this work if you're not going to be able to see the output. So you'll want to make sure Chart Output is created. And once that is checked, click OK. And Excel works a few minutes, and there is your histogram. And it creates it on a brand new sheet. And that's okay. That's okay. It's perfectly okay to do this. I like my charts to be a little bit bigger, so I'm just going to drag the corner of this box and make my histogram a little bit larger. You'll notice that there are gaps between my bars, and I need to remove those gaps. So to do that, highlight any of the bars, and then right-click, and down below in this little dialog box that opens up is Format Data Series. Open that up and use the slider bar for gap width to bring that all the way down to 0. And there is your histogram. Now notice there are still some gaps between the bars because a lot of these classes that were created as a result of constructing my group frequency distribution don't have any data values associated with them. That's okay. But if I've got bars for classes that are right next to each other, I don't want any gaps between those bars. Also, you'll notice that this group frequency distribution has a more and 0 column. I want to remove that. There is my histogram. I have a title. My vertical axis has a title. My horizontal axis has a title, but it's bin, and I don't want that. I want boundaries. So just highlight that field and overwrite bin with boundaries. And there is my histogram and my group frequency distribution. And so I'm going to change that tab. I'm going to call that dist for distribution and hist for histogram. And so that's part 2 and 3 of my Excel project. And of course, I want to hit my save button. So now if anything happens, if my computer crashes, or I end up losing power, or my battery runs down somehow, at least I know my categorical distribution and my frequency distribution and my histogram for parts 2 and 3 of the Excel project are all done. So I'm not going to have to do those again. The next part of your Excel project is to create an ogive and a frequency polygon. So I'm going to do the polygon first. So I'll use one of these extra sheets. And for this, I'm going to go back to my boundaries. I'm going to copy my boundaries to the frequency polygon sheet that I'm going to use. Oh, I think I hit a wrong button. I didn't like that. Okay, well, I'll just do it this way then. I'm just going to copy the whole page. I didn't like that either. What have I done? Okay, there we go. We're back in business. All right, there are my boundaries, and now I need to calculate the midpoints. Well, the midpoint of each particular class is the halfway point between the first upper class boundary and the first lower class boundary. So I want to find the average of 57.5 and 314.5. So in the midpoint column, for my very first group frequency, my first class, I want to find the average. So I'm going to input a formula. I want the average of my first two upper class boundaries. And that midpoint is 186. And that's really the only time I need to do that, because I know my class width is going to be 257. And each of my midpoints is going to be separated by 257. So I can take the first midpoint, which is located in field D7, and add the field in E3 to it, and keep doing that. So I'm going to add D8 plus E3 and D9 plus D9 plus E3 and D10 plus E3 and D11 plus 3 and D12 plus E3 and D13 plus E3, and I'm going to keep doing that. And then I need midpoints at the beginning and the end where my frequency is going to be 0, so that this frequency polygon will end up getting closed off. So it's D21 plus E3. And then my first midpoint, which was 186, I need another midpoint that's 257 below that. So I'll have D7 minus E3. And there are my midpoints. So there are my midpoints, and I know from the frequency distribution, I can just copy those frequencies and line them up next to my midpoints and add a frequency of 0 for the final midpoint where my frequency is going to be 0, so I will close off the curve. And now that I've got the midpoints and the frequencies, I can highlight those two fields, and I want to insert a line graph. depending on which version of Excel that you're using. I've got the older version of Excel, so I have a separate line option. It looks slightly different in the newer versions of Excel, but you'll definitely want to input a line graph, and it creates two graphs. Just delete that very first one, the blue line. You don't need that one. And there is your frequency polygon. Now we're not done, because we need to give our axis titles, and our chart needs to have a title. So you go to Layout. I want to add a primary horizontal axis title and a primary vertical axis title. So my vertical axis represents frequencies. My horizontal axis represents midpoints. My chart needs a title, so I know that this is going to be a polygon. And the final thing that I need to do is to change my horizontal axis labels from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. to the actual midpoints that I've got highlighted. So just click the horizontal axis until it's highlighted. That's not working. Okay, there we go. Highlight the horizontal axis labels, right click, select data, and then edit. And the axis label range, this is where you highlight the midpoint column. And Excel will change all of the midpoints. And there is my polygon. I certainly don't want to have to do that again, so I'm going to change my Excel description tab for this one to polygon, and then of course hit my save button. This is the chart that probably has the most errors for students, because they'll forget that the polygon gets closed off on both ends. So you'll need to be very careful about that. The next part of the Excel project is to construct an ogive, so we'll do that now. And I'll let this be my ogive, so I'm going to go ahead and select my ogive. For this, I need to copy the frequency distribution, because the ogive uses boundaries and the cumulative frequencies. And I need to insert, okay, I'll call this boundaries. Frequencies, and of course I need cumulative frequencies for the ogive. So the ogive is a graph of increasing. We're accumulating observations as we pass through each of the classes. I'm going to start with a cumulative frequency of 0. So in column C2, I'm going to tell it I want it to input the data value that is in field B2. And then whatever data value was in C2, I want to add to it the number of observations listed in field B3, the number of observations being contributed by that first class. And so once I've gotten to 314.5, I've accounted for 9 of my observations. Then I'm going to add the 7 observations for my second class to the 9 observations from my first class. So I'm going to take field C3 and add field B4 to it. And then take C4 and add B5, and C5 and add B6, and C6 and add B7, and C7 and add B8, and C8 and add B9, and C9 plus B10, and C10 plus B11, and C11 plus B12. Hopefully your keyboard isn't as beaten up as mine is. I have to sometimes double hit the keys. So that's C12 plus B13, and C13 plus B14, and C14 plus B15, and C15 plus B16, and C16 plus B17. And so now I've got my my data. I'm going to highlight all three columns, and I'm going to insert another line graph. And this time it gives me three charts. Of course, I don't want the first one, so I delete that one. I don't want this one in red. I'll delete that one. I do want the second one remains because that's the cumulative frequencies. So there's my ogive. I need to go and click the Layout tab and add axis titles. Now, if you're using an older, newer version of Excel, there will be a button next to your graph with a plus symbol, and you'll click that button and a little box will open up with options that you can choose to add axis titles. I've got an older version of Excel, and they're listed up at the top of the screen. So I want a horizontal axis title, and I want a vertical axis title, and of course I want a chart title. So this is my ogive, and my axis title. These are back to being boundaries. My vertical axis now is cumulative frequencies. And I need to change my horizontal axis labels to the actual boundaries. I don't know why that keeps popping up. So highlight the horizontal axis labels, right click, select data, and edit the horizontal axis, and this is where you input, just highlight all your boundaries that you've created, and there is your ogive. And then of course hit save. That's probably parts 2 through 5 are probably the most time consuming. They're the most tedious part of the Excel project. The rest of the project goes by fairly quickly, but that parts 2 through 5 will take a little bit of time. For the rest of the Excel project, the next thing is to construct it says a pie chart. I'm going to do my Pareto chart first. You can do the Excel project in any order that you wish. You don't have to follow this particular order. And I always like my Pareto chart to go next. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I've got a data set here listing countries and the number of hours that school students spend studying outside of class per week on average. And remember, this field, a Pareto chart, the data needs to be sorted first. I've gone ahead and already sorted this data set, but if it wasn't sorted, highlight the data, select the Data tab and the Sort option, and you'll have to tell it on which column do you want to do the sorting, a column A or column B. And I want this on column B, and we want to arrange this from largest to smallest, or you can do it smallest to largest, but I want largest to smallest. And it sorts the data by the number of hours that students spend studying, and we're ready to input our Pareto chart. In Excel, it's done by inputting a column chart. Need to make sure that we input our highlight the data. If there's no data highlighted, Excel won't create anything for you. So highlight the data, then select the 2D column chart, and there's your Pareto chart. But we need to remove the gaps between the bars, so highlight any bar, then right click, select Format Data Series, and use the slider bar for gap width and bring that all the way over to 0. And there is your Pareto chart. Of course, we need to add axis titles. And give the chart a title. So this is a Pareto chart. My axis title is going to be country. And my vertical axis is going to be hours. And I'll label this Pareto. And then hit save. The next part of the Excel project, well, now let's do our pie chart. So in Excel, I've got some information on what percentage of time people on average spend doing various activities. And now I'm ready to insert a pie chart using this information. This is very easy. Shouldn't take you hardly any time at all. Insert. Of course, I've got to highlight the data first. So I want a pie chart. Just select pie. And I need to give the graph a title. And down on the tab, I'll just describe this as a pie chart and hit save. The next part of the Excel project is to construct a time series graph for problem number 26 on page 106. And I've got another data set that I'm going to use for this. And it's the profit for a company in millions of dollars over time. So we're tracing from 2010 to 2016. Highlight the data. Insert. I want a line chart. I don't want the first one. So get rid of that. There's your time series graph. I do need to input axis titles. So this, my horizontal axis will be years. My vertical axis will be profits. In millions. I need to change my horizontal axis titles to represent my years. And then I need to give my chart a title. And this is a time series graph, so I'm going to change my tab down here at the bottom of the page to time series and click hit save. And at this point, we've completed 8 of the 10 parts of the Excel project, just 2 more to go. Now, parts 9 and 10 use data set number 12 from page 808 in the hard copy of the book or in the end matter of the electronic version of the book. We've copied that data set for you in D2L, so just open up that data set and copy it into your version of Excel. So just copy and paste. And so I'm going to calculate my measures of variation and so my measures of central tendency are going to go here, and that is going to be the mean, the median, and the mode. And I want to get Excel to calculate these quantities for me. So next to in the column next to the mean, I'm going to do a formula, more functions, statistical, and I want the average. And a dialog box pops up, and I have to tell where is the data located. And that's field dates 1 through 29. Click OK, and there's your mean. Then I go down to the column next to the label median. More functions, statistical. Select median. Highlight where the data is located. Select OK. And then for the mode, more functions, statistical. Mode. Highlight all of the data. Click OK. I will tell you a word of warning. If there is more than one mode in a data set, Excel will only give you one mode. So if there are multiple modes, you're going to have to manually enter those. And in the data set that you're using from data set 12, there are 2 modes for that data set. Excel will only give you one. You'll need to manually enter what the other one is. Just a word of warning, because a lot of people don't realize that Excel doesn't give you the proper mode if there's multiple ones. But that is done. Those are my measures of central tendency. So I just put tendency. Maybe I should make that central tendency. And click Save. And the final part of the Excel project is to calculate the measures of variation. Well, the measures of variation are the range, the variance, and the standard deviation. Well, the range, we've already calculated this. We know how to do it, but it is, I want the difference between the highest and the lowest data value. So it's the maximum. Highlight your data. And then up in the formula bar, we want to also subtract the minimum. So go back to More Functions. This time select the minimum. Highlight your data. And there is your range. For the variance, I've got a spelling error. For the variance, More Functions, Statistical, scroll way down toward the bottom, and you'll see a bunch of variable options. var.p is the variance for a population. var.s is population for a variance for a sample. You'll want the sample version. So some students will not select the proper version and they don't get this correct. Highlight the data, click OK. And then do the same thing for the standard deviation. Go to More Functions, Statistical, Standard Deviation. You've got a whole bunch of different options. Select the one for a sample, standard deviation.s. Highlight where the data is. Click OK. And you're done. I'm going to change this tab down at the bottom to variation. Of course, hit Save, and my Excel project is completed. Once you've got it ready to upload, you go back into D2L, and I will log in as a student. Oh no, I've lost my internet connection. Okay, it'll be back in just a second. Okay, I want to view as a student. So will it let me view this as a student? Okay, now I'm logged in as a student. Go to the Assignments tab. You'll see various drop boxes. The Excel project drop box. So select that Excel project link. A rubric shows up, and this is how you're going to be graded for each part of your Excel project. So to earn the maximum points, make sure that all the descriptions in this perfect column are met. But you'll receive between 0 and 15 points or 10 points for each particular part of the project. To upload your version for me to take a look at, select Add a File. And you'll have to tell where the file is located. If it's on your computer, then you'll have to upload the file. So you'll want to find the one that is appropriate for you. Mine was on my desktop, if I can find it. I've got a whole bunch. I don't think that that's right. I thought I did do that. Okay, well, I know this isn't the right, that's not the right one, but that'll work for now. And then once you've uploaded, you can say, if you get it in early enough, please look over my Excel project and click submit. And that's all there is to completing the Excel project. Hopefully you will have found this video to be helpful. Good luck completing your Excel project, and I may produce another video about the final project that is going to be due in a few weeks. Take care, everyone.